singing it. Oh, go live.
Go on then, Helen.
Go live.
Will we hear it tonight?
Tonight you'll hear it. Oh yeah, you've got to come tonight. I wouldn't just give you anything for free here. No.
Don't give away anything for free.
Although, no, it is obviously free to come.
Yeah.
Right, so we are now on that bit. Okay, so I'll share the screen. Slideshow. Share screen. Speak aloud while I do it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Good. Close some of these windows. Bring that over here. Okay, so it's over there, but that's
Hi, Liz.
Hi there, Rachel. I'll apologise in advance, Rachel. I'm sort of joining you at the beginning here. I'm going to have to dip out around just after 4, going to London for a live music event.
Oh my goodness! No, does that even happen? Is it...
Well, it's apparently so. It's in a COVID secure venue. It's my son plays in an orchestra, which he helped found. So they're giving a sort of a 1 hour kind of Christmas concert.
How lovely.
Down there.
Brilliant. Oh.
And I hope to join you later at the party. I won't be there at 8 o'clock because we'll come back and then we'll eat and then I'll join the party hopefully before you. We've got
quite a lot to keep us going, so it's rather nice actually. We've got a couple of quizzes, we've got some songs, people doing things, and so the main thing is Stephen.
Oh, right.
Main attraction.
So, main attraction. So that's what the
star attraction.
Yes,
that's right. Take my jumper off tonight.
Have you got anything to wear Christmassy? I tried to get something Christmassy.
Well, my shirt is Christmassy. My shirt is Christmassy. That's why I'm going to take my jumper off.
Oh, I see. No, I tried on something, but I realised it's one of these things you put on your head, but the decoration came beyond the Zoom bit. So I thought, well, that's not much good. So be a bit of tinsel.
I've been making my Christmas face coverings, but of course you don't need those on Zoom.
It's always sunny in the Isle of Wight. It really is this week. Okay, shall I do the housekeeping bit and then we'll make a start, and then I'll start. Wait, let me find the record button ready for when that's got to happen. Right, okay, so 12th of December, here we are. You've taken your seats and you know our etiquette, that we're always kind and friendly and positive, and we're happy to host the events, and we don't charge people. Speakers kindly offer their service without payment, and volunteers run the events, and speakers and participants are responsible for what they say. That's our terms and conditions. So housekeeping is, if you could rename yourself if necessary, please. That would be great, so that we know who you are. Please feel free to use the chat. We really do like interactivity. If you've got a question, put a Q in front of it, and then David Binns and I we are monitoring the chat as well. So there may be things that we can answer, or you as participants as well. If there's a question there and you know the answer, please just write the answer. That's fine. And it may be some answers from, oh, I've misspelled that, from Rachel at the end. I think I said that last week as well and didn't correct it. Session's going to be recorded. We haven't started yet, but we will be recording it. So if for any reason you're unhappy about having your name there, because on the website and everywhere your name would appear, then leave now and we'll send you the link so you can watch it later on. The most frequently asked question during Rachel's session is normally, where are the slides? Can I get the slides? So if we can all of us who are here now, can you be sure that you can, if someone asks that question, just answer them and say they will be available on Monday. So feel free to answer that question. That'll be on the NCELP site. Due to run for about 90 minutes, no need at all to apologise if you need to leave early. We totally understand. We suggest turning off the webcam while Rachel is presenting. It could be at the end people want to turn on their webcams to ask questions or just have a chat. but that's our suggestion, because for some people with the bandwidth, it may be a bit difficult if there are lots of webcams on at the same time. So the recording is about to start now. It's Saturday, the 12th of December, 2020, and we welcome you to Rachel Hawkes, Dr. Rachel Hawkes, talking about making practice meaningful. There she is. So Rachel is here. We've also got with us David Binns, Director of UK Operations, who will be speaking to us during the session. We really look forward to that. And my name's Helen Myers. I'm chair of the London branch of the Association for Language Learning. And we host this Zoom room, which is why I've been asked just to do this introduction. So, member of ALL, are you in ALL? If you are, please use the chat now to tell people that you are, show off about it, and tell people how important it is to belong to the unique subject association. As far as, and obviously there's an awful lot you get out of being a member. Rachel is past president. We've got lots, in fact, we've got a couple of presidents here available at the moment, and we can all tell you why it's worthwhile, why it's worthwhile joining. As far as this webinar is concerned and others, Rachel, you'll be arranging, won't you, for it to be hosted on the NCELP site, but we'll also put a link from the ALL London site, and there are lots of other webinars that you might want to dip into there. Coming soon, well, actually this has already happened. We've had a webinar on preparing for GCSE speaking endorsement. We're going to have another one in February. That went really well, and it's lovely to see names here from people who contributed to that. Tonight at 8 o'clock, we've got a Christmas party. Everybody is invited, and it really will have a spin on it, will be cultural. We were inspired by Rachel last week, and immediately people had lots of ideas about what we could do. So we've got about 45 people who signed up so far. We've got room for more if you'd like to come. And then the 16th of January, ALL London is holding an event. But also Stephen is here. He leads this. We have something called First Fridays for ALL trainees, NQT and RQT. So very welcome to come along to that. But this is what you're all here for. You're here to listen to Dr. Rachel Hawkes, who last week spoke about culture and cultural capital in the language classroom, this week making practice meaningful. So there is a description of Rachel Hawkes, which you'll have read when you registered. We leave it there so that people who are watching it afterwards can just pause and read about how much she's got to offer us. And that's about the session which we're going to be doing now. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you. Right, let's try and share my screen. Oh,
Rachel, I missed off the very last slide, which was the most important one.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of people are the same.
Right. It was to do with the Just Giving and the fact that Rachel is doing this and would love it if you could contribute to her Just Giving site. Do you have that slide that you show later on? Because I think
I do.
You do, right.
And thank you, Helen. And someone else asked me earlier to repost in the chat the link to the site, so it should be buried under a few, but if you scroll back up the chat you will see it if you need it. But thank you, Helen, for remembering that. And I've just remembered that I need to share my computer sound. Okay, so thanks for coming along to this session. We're going to have a look at practice, which is something that we all do a lot of in our classrooms. So just a few things to keep us thinking about that from me. So I've started off with a couple of questions. I always find, I think it's a mark of the limitations of my brain. I always find that I have to set a question and answer it in order to try and be clear in my sessions. So asked what is practice, and then trying to define that. And rather than doing my normal thing of going to a dictionary, I didn't think that would be very, very helpful for language practice. So this is a sort of self-carved definition of practice, just so we know what we're talking about in this session. And essentially, it's absolutely everything from the very first encounter with a word or a grammar feature or a sound of the language or whatever, right up until you know it to the point where you can use it independently and eventually automatically, but that is some way off. So I think independent use can sometimes still be a little bit slower than obviously it would be for a native speaker, but being able to put the language together, it's that journey from I've heard it and right the way, all of the encounters that you need, right to the point where you can then use that language together with other language to make meaning. What makes practice meaningful? Essentially, easier to get at this by saying, when is it not meaningful? It's not meaningful when it's mechanical. So essentially, practice is meaningful when it's not mechanical. So when you can't complete a task without putting all of your attention on the meaning as well as the form. If you're just focused on the form, you will end up not making the connection strong enough with what that form, what that ending, what that sound, writing connection, what any of those things actually mean. And then when you come to want to make meaning, the form won't back you up. You haven't got that in order to put together those sounds and those words to say what you want to say. In order to get there, to this place where you can communicate, you need a lot of practice. And I think even now, the new research that's being done, more research that's being done on practice shows it's never going to reverse this trend. It's showing that you need more practice than anyone thought, a lot more practice than anyone thought, in order to retain words over the long term. In order for most learners to retain words most of the time, takes an incredible amount of meaningful structured practice. And I think keeping our focus on what makes practice meaningful is really, really important. So the student, if we ask ourselves the question and hold up this sort of measuring stick to anything we do, really, anything we create for the classroom, anything we download from tests, anything we take off any website ever, anything that comes out of our brain in the middle of the night and we think, oh, we need a way of measuring whether that's a good idea to spend time on. It's never going to, whatever we do isn't really going to do any harm particularly, but it's often, because it's time poor, our situation of teaching, we do have to make really good judgments about where is most learning going to happen. And one of the things about meaningful practice is that we need to ensure that the student can't really do the task without thinking about meaning and form while they're doing it. So they have to be making this connection with meaning and with form. If they can complete it, as I remember doing countless verb exercises when I was learning languages, where after a while you're just writing ENT, 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 and you could almost complete all of that bit if it were a sort of French activity that I'm remembering from present tense plural endings. You could almost write all of those in first and then go back through and check which verb you were meant to be putting on the front end of it. Well, that's the kind of mechanical thing which dislocates meaning and form, and then is less useful for attaining language over the long term. Okay, so how much do we need of this meaningful practice? Well, there is no answer for that, except for as much as possible, and therefore using every single minute of class time to the max is really necessary. If we're comparing, you know, we know that 5-year-olds, by the time they go to school, they've acquired language pretty well, orally anyway. And they've done that by having 17,000 hours of exposure by the age of 4. And then you compare that to the 450 hours approximately that our learners will get if we're just counting secondary, because I know that there are lots of places where you can add the hours of primary to that, but not every area. We know that that's not happening universally across the country yet. So if we just take 450 hours over 5 years at secondary, it would take 189 years to have as much exposure as these 4-year-olds have. 189 years of having the rate of exposure that our secondary learners have. So that the comparison isn't even worth making. Well, it's worth making, but it's worth then saying, okay, so we need to do something radically different in the classroom, because when I keep saying time poor, this is how time poor it actually is. Every single moment of classroom practice has to count. So it's really important to identify what learners should practice and then how they can best do that for maximum retention. And what they have found is that learning is most successful at this early stage and in this classroom scenario when you need to manipulate the language in order to fill a genuine information gap, which sounds very EFL. They've been on that trail for years, teaching English as a foreign language, but where there is a genuine information gap and students have to manipulate, and there's an element of struggle as they draw different pieces of knowledge together and construct those sentences, that struggle is key and helpful to helping learners retain the language for longer and use it more constructively. So if we do a summary of what we're going to look at, or what kinds of practice work best that we're going to try and exemplify, practice needs to be very frequent, and obviously at the moment that's a really, really difficult / impossible thing to be achieving, because the schools in my trust have gone to one lesson lasting about 120 minutes or 100 minutes, and then not again for 2 weeks. So that whole frequency of lesson has kind of gone out of the window because of COVID. And I know that even before COVID, some schools at Key Stage 3 were having 100-minute lessons and then nothing for another week. So already that was a challenge. It needs to be spaced so that the same learning comes back time and time again. There's been quite a lot of talk about that with a focus on cognitive science. It must have this meaning and this form focus, and the element of struggle is really positive. And then the one thing I haven't mentioned yet is multimodal. So incorporating different modes and modalities. So listening combined with writing, reading combined with speaking, meshing them together rather than considering an exercise is just there for the practicing of listening. Multimodal tasks can also help us to boost the effectiveness of practice. And all of those things can be applied to the strands of knowledge. So you can have frequent, spaced, meaning and form focused on phonics. You can have the same on vocabulary, you can have the same on grammar, and obviously on all three combined as well. So quick layout of the session. That was the introductory bit, but the session's got 2 parts to it. The first part is about this making language practice meaningful. So connecting, not losing that connection between meaning and form in every single activity that we try and set for students to do. And the second part picks up a little bit on last week's session and focuses on using authentic texts, which are both literary and non-fiction. So coming back to some culture, but also just language in different contexts and in different formats. Okay, so concrete examples. If we're going to unpack some really practical examples, we're going to need to sort of have some sense of what we might be trying to teach. And so I've had to narrow it down. I've narrowed down to Spanish, Year 7, Term 1, and I'm going to focus on the grammar of that rather than vocabulary and phonics particularly. And so if we think about, just for a second, and then get prepared to type furiously into the chat, let's brainstorm what you would say are the absolute grammar essentials for Spanish Year 7 Term 1. If you start doing that now, and then I'll just hold off on bringing anything up at the moment. Think about everything that you would include. I can't actually see any of the chat, I have to say. Just realized that even with my 2 screens. Anyway, I'm still going to give you a chance to do it. It's useful.
Do you want me to read some of the things that people are writing?
Yeah, just throw them out,
So,
Helen. That would be nice, actually.
Nouns and gender of nouns. Gender, I have and I don't have. The I form of key verbs. Use of main verbs, tener, ser. Present, ser, estar, tener, me gusta, me gustan. Gender, first person pronoun. I don't speak Spanish, but ser, estar.
Yeah.
Present tense, regular verbs, introduction of gender, word order, adjectives, agreement, prepositions.
Okay, perfect. So we're not even, we're not sitting down to do this for any sort of rigorous testing purposes. So there may not be an absolute matchup, but I should think that all of us have got these things in common. So essentially, the first thing I heard was gender, nouns. We've got articles in there. We've got adjective agreement. Ser, estar came up. I don't remember there being questions, but I know that they are widely taught in Term 1. Tener definitely came up. So someone else said sort of basic verbs, as far as I remember. And the only difference, which I was expecting, was the gustar and the gustar type verbs, which for various reasons I now leave out of Term 1. But that bit's not so important. I think if you ask any teacher, they will have a rough idea of where you start with all of these things. So if we think that we're going to now begin to sort of critique a few activities and say, is this giving us value for our time? Is this, given that time is the crucial thing that learners don't have, and when we agree that we can't really do damage, but we might not be doing the best that we possibly could do for attention, I think it's best to look at it from those terms. This is something that I copied out of a textbook that I know very well, and it's not fair to say that it's the only thing that this textbook was doing, but it is an activity from the textbook. So if we spent time with learners asking them to do this, say for a homework or something, I'd like us to just have a look at it and say whether it meets the criteria that we've just looked at for meaningful practice. So is there a connection between the meaning and the form in this task? Is there an element of desirable difficulty where things need to be pulled from memory? Okay, so Helen, read anything.
So we have yes, no. Not really.
Yes, no, not really.
No, I can do it without knowing Spanish. The nouns do not follow the rule.
Okay, there we go. That's getting at it. I think, when we start asking really, really precise questions, and that some of those answers that Helen was reading out was getting to it there. Do we need to know the meaning of any of those words in 1 to 6 to do the task? No, because you can just look at the pattern and it tells you, you have to actually understand something here that isn't stated. So you have to understand that the M in brackets relates to the M over here, and the F in brackets relates to the M over here, the F over here, which actually might be lost on some people. And why shouldn't it be? It's not explicitly stated. But anyway, assuming they could navigate that, you would not have to know any of the word meanings in order to get the answers right. Okay, and is there anything You know, do we need to actually remember that un is for masculine words and una for feminine words? So do we actually learn the articles as an outcome of this task? I don't think so. Do we have to is there any purpose at all to having these in a sentence? Do we gain anything by having different forms of the verb tener? Is there any requirement on us to process tengo, tienes, tiene, and recognize that those are different? No, there's no reference to the verb. So those verbs might as well not be there, because unless a child is going to think for themselves, oh, tengo, I wonder what that means, I'll just go and look it up. Or, oh yes, I see they've used tiene here, that means they're talking about he, she. There is no prompt for them to process that. So it might as well not be there. We don't have to listen and understand, read and understand, speak and understand, or, even though this is a written task, write and understand the meaning of those sentences. So I think that the chances that this is the best way to spend any time in a classroom or outside of a classroom practicing this knowledge is fairly minimal. And we could easily say, and I think we would all want to say, well, I don't do that kind of mechanical practice in the lesson, but things do get set for homework, and this is not too dissimilar. This is a piece of homework that was set for a year 7 pupil learning Spanish after about 15 hours of teaching. So all of that hopefully had been taught in the classroom, but that's quite a lot to just have all there, to be honest, all in one go. There is some more information and some websites, but I think the more problematic bit, this is definites, indefinites, plurals, singulars, masculine and feminine, all on one little sheet. But perhaps the problem is this one, when you see what they had to do with the task. And then the problem, well, they had to produce the articles, but you struggle to perceive a pattern. We haven't started with the idea that in Spanish, a load, almost all, the vast majority of masculine nouns end in O, and the vast majority of feminine nouns end in A. So if that was your rule and your only rule, and you applied it, you would get the answers right almost all of the time. But the ones on this sheet have sort of singularly picked out all of the exceptions that there seem to be in the Spanish language. So we've got the la mano, which is one of several exceptions, the el problema, which always catches them out, the la foto, and then we've got the masculine nouns that don't end in o, so football and guisante, mixed in with a couple that do follow the pattern, mesa and el piso. But if you were trying to analyze that language and draw out a pattern about Spanish gender, I think you would give up, and I think you wouldn't necessarily know. So just in a different choice of nouns, this activity could have been better. So I've taken this original one and thought, how can we make this a bit better, and how can we improve the processing whilst still providing a worksheet, essentially, because we have to provide worksheets. So I had a go at trying to keep the format as much the same as I could. So you see it starts off in a very similar way. It just puts in an extra note to stress about grammatical gender, not biological gender, just lest we find that confusing. Let's state that right first of all. But this bit here, I think, is then crucial. Masculine nouns, most, many, lots, masculine nouns end in o, and feminine nouns end in a. Okay, so now we don't give the M, F, F, M, M, F. We expect a pattern to be applied so that we can start working with it and getting it embedded. And we have to put the un in where it needs to go, and we have to put the una in where it needs to go. But then we also want to make use of the tiene, tiene, tengo, and at least process 2 forms for meaning. So Mia's telling you what she has, Elena's saying what she has, and they have, and obviously those answers there shouldn't actually be there, but it means that they then have to process the words for meaning. So they are going to know the meaning of these actual nouns, and we're going to know the meaning of tiene and tengo, but it probably wouldn't have taken much longer, if any longer, to do that task than it would to have done the original one. So in terms of just tiny tweaks, stripping out the essential giveaway clues, the M and the F, to prevent mechanical completion. The meaning of the short sentences need to be understood to complete the activity. So you absolutely have to process the noun meaning, you absolutely have to process the verb meaning, and then you contrast the 2 verb forms tengo and tiene, so that there's a chance that they can get those really nailed as well. As it happens, these nouns happen to be very frequent. As it happens, they also don't fall into a particularly nice, obvious category like animals. But then when you look at animals, you see that some are nice. So gato and perro, they go nicely with gender, and un caballo does too. But then you look at una cobaya and think, oh, what's the chance of a pupil confusing and conflating caballo with cobaya, because they're so similar. I know this because I've taught exactly these 2 words together for many years, and thought, oh, those are going to be the ones that they're going to confuse, which they do. But when we know that, we could just say, well, let's not have both of those there. Raton, is it the most helpful word for gender? Not really, because it's not a patterned word, nor is una serpiente, because those can be of either gender. And when we get onto plurals, we'll see that pez doesn't pluralize in a nice, obvious way. So that's possibly one to ignore from the beginning. Given that we have a choice about which words to present, let's present the ones with the maximum regularity for patterns, rather than because they fit into a nice group called animals. It's just critiquing ourselves just a little bit in that respect. You know, the survey that came out recently about the current GCSE and how many teachers, the NALA survey, if you haven't read it, have a read of it. One of the findings was that 73% of teachers do not think that topics are important. That was a great finding for me, because, you know, ultimately it is topics in this sense at the very earliest stage that sometimes lead us to present confusing clumps of words that don't necessarily give the student initially the best chance of grasping patterns and working with patterns and making things slip into their heads and into their psyches, so such that they can then use them more quickly and remember them more easily. Okay, so obviously we want students to get some additional practice time outside the classroom if we possibly can. I mean, we know that a lot of students have been doing really well with that during COVID, but then it's shown up a massive differential, hasn't it? Not just in terms of access, but also, if we're honest, in terms of motivation. The students that do have a phone and could use Quizlet, but just don't really feel like it. You know, that difference is showing up as well. But we have to try as we might to get students to access regular practice outside the classroom, and some sort of way of mechanizing that practice. What I mean is providing a simple tool that marks their answers correct or not is motivating, because then they can get some instant feedback. So we may, I'm just going to gloss over this slide because I think I dwelt on the whole issue of gender quite a lot. If we do want to present vocabulary, obviously we need to practice vocabulary. They might have practiced it before they get to the lesson, that's excellent, but we're not going to assume that once they arrive they will totally know it. That's just going to have been first encounter or if we're talking about every single time they see the word and do something with it as an encounter, then if they did their 30 minutes on Quizlet, they'd have probably had roughly 8 to 9 encounters with each word before they come to the lesson, which would be a massive step up. But it still wouldn't mean that 3 days later, if it was 3 days ago that they did their homework, that they would still have it completely in their heads. So we always need to have this regularity of practice and bring things back, which, you know, we know. However, the fact that all of these end in "o" and they're all masculine is going to make the learning easier. The fact that all of these end in "a" and are feminine is going to make the learning easier, and the process of fixing that gender, which is a very, very tricky issue for English speakers because we don't have it. Therefore, we need to make it as salient as possible, and we can do that by helping to categorize and select our words really logically for patterns. Okay, so we need to have opportunities to recall and to, you know, that's the desirable difficulty. Which one is it? What's the word and what's its gender? Really, you know, sort of not losing sight of the gender of the word at any point, keeping that firmly in view as we practice. And then again, odd one out, but for gender, not for any characteristics other than the gender of the word. Again, so just making the gender part salient. We can be recalling the actual words at the same time, but we do find that students recall noun meanings, the actual noun part, a bit more readily than they recall the gender that goes with it. Often the gender bit is the bit that gets sort of missed out of the equation when it comes to long-term retention. So recognizing that gender really is an issue. You do some very simple exercises to keep the focus high on that. Here is the indefinite article. Which of these nouns must be being talked about? Process obviously the whole sentence afterwards for meaning. That can be done orally or written, depending. But essentially, we're always siphoning off this part of the knowledge, the word part, the gender part, so that we can keep students reconnecting with it time after time after time, so that it sticks. Okay, so es uno, es una, está en un, está en una. Again, which are the things that, oh, I should have put the audio on here.
Uno, es un, está en un.
Now, I have found that I have to explain the strangeness of having sentences with gaps, with bleeps. Why would you do that? That's not how the sentence works. But it is a very, very effective way on getting the brain to fill in the gap and focus on what is missing, what must it be, because I've heard un, and what's the word that comes afterwards. And some really fascinating studies are done with sort of this thing called eye tracking, where sort of almost babies, 18-month-old French, Spanish, Italian young children will be shown two nouns, and then only which are different genders, and then only the article will be said, and their eyes immediately alight on the right article. It's like for them it comes together, and for us that's something that that we need to practice a lot more. And then even in speaking, we talked about meaningful practice, and I think, you know, this is when we, you know, we begin to struggle with this word meaningful, because meaningful sometimes you know, is applied to, you know, having a conversation about what you want to talk about, which is some way off realistically from learners. The only way to shortcut to that is to present them with either a lot of written support, where they're actually then using things, they're picking and mixing things from a sheet, but they're using things that they couldn't then decide how to put together themselves. And that's a sort of shortcut to fluency, or a shortcut to meaningfulness, or perceived as such. But actually, I think that maybe we need to consider that if meaningful is about connecting form and meaning at that really basic level, then something like this, which looks on the face of it, you might say, well, that looks mechanical or that looks uninteresting. In reality, is the heart of what meaning connection is all about. So partner A has to say es una. They're not given the gender. They have to know the gender of the noun that comes with it. They're not allowed to say the noun, but they're given the noun in order to give them the idea. So this idea of connecting the two. So the partner A has to say es una, and partner B knows exactly which item is being talked about, because we're contrasting the two different genders here right the way down. And that's just the final bit. So a quick recap, that we're aiming for frequent, spaced, meaning and form focused, with this element of struggle and the multimodal. So here, just another, this is also from a textbook. I've just retyped it. And, you know, I haven't put what textbook it's from, because that's not important. You know, I can find some major gaps in the textbooks that I'm responsible for. So this is not about pulling apart different work. It's about just, what are we for as teachers if we're not thinking human beings that have to critically reflect on their own work and on the work of other people's? I think it's really, it's unbecoming of us if we just accept hook, line and sinker what somebody else says. And even if we like one idea or one resource, to then go along and think that all of the other things that come with that message must be right, that is missing a trick and probably not doing the best thing for our pupils. We have to shine a reflective light on ourselves time and time again, and keep doing it throughout our careers. You know, we must never be ashamed of something we've done before, because that was the best we could do at that particular time with the knowledge we had. But we must never think that we've got answers forever and ever. We must just critically reflect on the new stuff that comes our way and say, does that ring true for me? Does that make sense? Does that new piece of research actually add up to something in my book? And if it does, then we have a responsibility to act boldly and you know, turn our backs on certain things, however strong the voices might be in and around us. We need to have our own voice, and we need to be confident of it, and not take anybody else's word for it. So you know, sometimes that's very humbling. You know, there are certain things that I've said this at a different ALL meeting, that, you know, things I do differently now compared to 2 years ago. I've also could have done that a number of times during my career. If you're in it for 20 years, then hopefully you would have started doing some things differently along the way, because we still haven't found a perfect recipe yet. So this one here, again, as somebody mentioned before when I asked you to put things in the chat, if you could do this without knowing Spanish, it can't be a good task. That's a basic, isn't it? And so we've got some things here where we've got a gap to fill in. Something or someone, we're going to assume, lives in Colombia. So the first thing the human brain wants to do is quickly scan the text and go, oh, look, where can I find myself a clue here? We find Colombia. Oh, look, if we're clever, well, not clever, but if we're just a little bit sort of perhaps smart, we'll have a look to make sure Colombia doesn't exist in the other 3 tasks as well. But I would say that not everybody does even that, but you know, let's assume that we have got that, and then we work backwards, and then we see that there's a name there, and we conclude that it can be Daniel who lives in Colombia, and only Daniel. This can be done without processing tener, and we've got to assume that tener was probably the focus here, although it's a bit hard to tell because there's only tengo, so it's not contrasted with anything else that would mean that you had to consciously say to yourself, okay, that means I have, that means I have. It's also with years and ages, which is very confusing because that means I am to us in English speaking terms. So having tengo and tengo up against each other is not the best plan. But there is, I think you can stop at the point where you actually say, could you do this without knowing the language? And how many of these words do you actually have to know in order to get this task right? It's not doing damage. It's just, could it be more efficient? Could it lead to better retention? Could it lead to better mastery of the key language content that we all outlined at the beginning was tener, ser, estar? If it could do that, it would be a better task. So a couple, I've tried to run through all of the skills here looking at tener. We've got, this is an example of where listening is orienting the attention of the learner to the verb parts. So in order to do this task, you have to know the difference between tengo and tienes. And then it's processed for additional meaning. It's processed for the descriptor, so you get the adjective out of it and you get the object out of it. But the verb is not missed out. So when you listen, you can't get this right, or you can't get this task right without processing.
Uno. Tengo un barco. Es fantástico.
Okay, so there's nothing exciting about it. There's nothing revolutionary about it. It's the simplest sentence in the entire world, and yet because of the structure of the table and because you have to differentiate and contrast these two verb forms, you're going to process them for meaning. And you know, the question that people might ask is, well, does that result in memorizing it then? Does it result in retention? And it essentially it does. There have been a lot of studies that have shown that in classroom conditions like this, focusing the attention and listening and reading on the meaning and the form in these small pairs, so in these small pairs of meaning, so tengo and tienes, not the whole verb all at once, but tengo and tienes, is likely to lead to better retention of those, better learning of those over the long term than other methods. So and when we say other methods, the other methods that we're talking about are this other method. So it's been directly contrasted in research between what this would be, which is like an enriched text. So, you know, it's got lots of details in it. It's just the grammar's in there somewhere, but it's not crucial. It's not crucial for doing the task. The task is completely sort of different and adjunct to that. So comparing that in research conditions with this leads to the finding that this is better for retention and for understanding over the long term. Again, there's just a reading one. I'm going to speed up a little bit now because there are examples. Again, it is very simple, and if you take the fact out of it that it's not with animals and you just say, well, these are a kind of, you know, slightly random selection of nouns, but you know, we're basically in the house and home scenario. If you take that topic side of things out of it, this is just normal sentences that you would be doing exercises on in any classroom, and yet because you are deliberately processing the difference between tengo and tienes every time, you are likely to learn those better. And so, you know, if we're thinking about our current courses and our textbooks, we all know that we don't just ever follow a textbook, you know, from start to finish, page by page. No, not many people do that. So if we're thinking about what we could actually do to boost the learning and boost the understanding and therefore the retention of learners, it might be that it's in this focused, structured practice of contrasting pairs of grammar, whether it's the genders or whether it's, as here, the verb morphology. It is likely to pay dividends. So those things can be added in. Of course, you know, we have the problem that we do have is where the vocabulary doesn't play ball because it's still in these topic areas. Okay, so here we're processing again. So the partner A has to say he for this one. If you look at these straight away, you might think, oh, what are these weird pictures? But pupils have encountered these as being attached to meaning before, so that when they see them again, they're not surprised by them. This is he in number 1, he has a boat. So partner A has to say this full sentence, tiene un barco. And partner B has to process the tiene, because it could be tienes or it could be tengo. And then they have to, and they're in a different order. So it's not just house is going to be the first one they have to go. And what did they say again? It was he or she. And then what was it they had? Oh yeah, un barco. So they are providing listening practice for each other in their production. There is no speaking without someone else having to listen. So again, it's maximizing the learning time because they're pivoted on the meaning of those forms. You have to listen carefully. You have to process the language. It's like doing another listening comprehension for partner B. And then obviously partner B gets his or her turn to speak as well, saying, tienes un libro, and partner A has to find, okay, what was tienes again? Oh, that was the you. Okay, so you have a book. Again, you know, if it looks like a clinical science experiment, so be it. But it is about the nuts and bolts at the very, very beginning of building that core understanding. Imagine if learners really have achieved mastery of tener by the end of term 1, so that they are able to say tienes in a question, tienes in a statement, tengo in a question, tengo in a statement, tiene in a question, tiene in a statement, without having to think too much. They have automatized those after so much connection of meaning and form, meaning and form, meaning and form through all of the modes and modalities. And obviously in speaking as well, this is, I think I've moved away from tener now. This is using es and son with adjective agreement. So they have to look at number 1, and the clue they get is bonitos. So they need to go and look. So first of all, we're processing the adjective for meaning. We're seeing that that's this place here, San Sebastián, and it's Barcelona. So we now need to put San Sebastián y Barcelona, and then we have to know the verb. That's the bit we have to retrieve. There's the bit of difficulty to get that out of our heads. We're not going to be able to copy it from anywhere because it's absolutely crucial that we know that. Something is barato, so we have to process that for meaning. So this is writing, but it's also reading. It's reading of the adjectives because they don't have to produce the adjectives, but it's connecting the adjective form with the grammar, with the other language that they're then going to have to produce. So we then know that that means cheap. We know it's Bilbao, so we then need to say Bilbao es barato. Contrasting, the two grammar forms that we're contrasting are the es and the son. So it's piece by piece, but essentially in terms of language, we've got to practice in hearing and reading the grammar, contrasting these pairs of features that change the meaning, these tiny small changes that make a difference in meaning, and we practice those across listening, reading, speaking and writing. In the speaking activities, the listener is using the language as well. They are having to understand. There is no switching off and then waiting till it's their turn to speak. They actually have to process for meaning and form as well. Practicing writing the grammar, you have to actively choose which word. Is it es or is it son? And in fact, in that last activity, it looked very simple, but they need to retrieve both from their heads. There was no piece of paper where those things were written down. Just a quick look at multimodal. So things like a dictogloss, things like segmentation. So segmentation where you listen and read, and then you stop. Then you stop the recording, and then students have to immediately say what's the word that comes after, so that you know that they're following along. And that really helps in particular with French, which is quite difficult to segment, much more difficult than Spanish and German. But also obviously then that's just one thing. Straight away after that, you choose your places where you want to stop, and you say what could come after that word instead of the one that is there. And then you've got a connection with meaning and with form, because it has to be, if it's an adjective, it would have to be another adjective. If it's an article and a noun, it would have to be a different article and a different noun. We're going to have a quick look at at Dictogloss. This is from a Year 8 lesson where students are going to listen to 10 sentences and have to make notes. It's too much for them to write it all. This is not a dictation. This is because dictation is great as well, but dictation is a lot about working memory, and Dictogloss is about listening, taking the meaning, and then knowing enough about how you put French together, or German or Spanish, that you can then reconstruct the overall meaning of that sentence in French, which may or may not be exactly the same as what you've heard, because there will have been a deliberate disruption, so that you're not going to parrot. You're not just going to write down exactly what it is that you heard. You're going to write down some notes which will have gaps in them. You might make notes in English. You might do a whole mixture, and then you'll actually have a compare and contrast with your partner, and you'll go, right, well, I think that means they're saying that something about primary school, and then it's the age of the pupils. Did you get anything? Yeah, I got that it was 6, and then what age up to? Oh, I got 11, I think. Okay, right, so how do we say primary school is for pupils from 6 to 11 years? And they have to then make that sentence. So Dictogloss is very different from dictation, but arguably gives you a little bit more for your time spent in the class.
L'école primaire est pour les élèves de 6 à 11 ans. On ne va pas à...
Okay, so that's the speed that was chosen for the delivery. So you can hear that it's slow, but then if you're imagining that you're trying to process that, collect enough information about it to then be able to compare and reconstruct it with your partner, there's quite a lot in there. That's Year 8. This is what the sentences look like at the end, and then there's a little bit of information about it that goes on. Again, this is another similar example, but in German. There were some nice comments last week about, oh, great to have some German examples. Now, this is a recent Year 8 lesson where students are practicing the difference between they have been practicing the difference between a modal verb that just has an infinitive at the end and something else. So es ist wichtig, for example, comma, that has a zu plus infinitive at the end. And they are now listening to something a little bit more extended. But what I've done underneath the slides in this one is to give 4 different activities that could be used with the same piece of listening. So this is 6 longish sentences saying things like, he doesn't like homework especially, but he should start it earlier. That kind of length of sentence. So nothing that you could actually keep wholly in your working memory and then write down verbatim. If you were going to want to do it as an elicited imitation, some people call that delayed dictation, but essentially it's elicited imitation. If you have it this length, what you're saying is that students have to not just rely on working memory. They are going to listen to it. Then there's going to be a pause, and during that time, they could be thinking about what the whole sentence meant in English, or they could be writing down, or they could be discussing with a partner what the whole sentence meant in English, trying to arrive at an oral translation. But then they're going to try and produce that sentence meaning in German. Then they're going to listen and check. And then they're going to check their English meaning. So there's elicited imitation, which is at the challenging end. There's straight dictogloss, which I just described previously. There is oral translation. So, and I mean, that's the kind of task that we currently have in the GCSE. There's one question in the AQA GCSE anyway, which is oral translation, where you hear a German question and you have to write down what that question means, or you hear a statement, you have to write down what that means. So that could be done here as well. Oral translation, play the German sentence. You would, for that, you would play it more than once. You'd certainly play it twice. And because we're not talking about assessing, we're talking about learning, you'd play it 3 times if you needed to. And students would directly translate it onto the page into English. That's quite nice, because then you can, and you have to adapt the animations obviously on this slide, which is actually set up for the Dichtgloss version. But that way round, once you've got the English only showing on the slide and the German's gone, then you can ask students to recreate the German orally from the English that they've had. I mean, to be honest, I know a lot of year 11 classes that I previously taught that would not have got to this level of understanding by this stage of year 8 in German. So there is something about it that just feels like it's working for me. Again, obviously, I'm not sure quite how I feel about the fact that there are 30,000 German speakers in Namibia. I kind of, it's like anything with colonialism of any kind, Europe to other places, I feel slightly awkward about it all, but they are there and they do speak German, and so they're making students aware of that seemed important. Having a text on it felt like a nice thing to do. It led to some interesting things, because obviously life over there is quite different. It's a different environment, a different surroundings, different foods to eat. It's actually a little bit like sort of, yeah, South Africa, Australia-y type sort of foods and eating habits from what I've picked up on. Now this one here is a segmentation task. So just to vary the languages a bit and show you one of those. This is going to stop.
Hola, Lucía. ¿Qué tal? Yo estoy bien. Me presento. Me llamo Amelia. Soy de Estados Unidos, pero vivo con mi familia en Inglaterra. ¿Tú?
Okay, so instead of the word familia, which pupils would say that was the next word, obviously, pupils then have to suggest what else they could put after that would make sense to something else. Vive en el norte de España. So recognizing that it needs to be a person, it needs to be a noun, it needs to be something that's alive anyway, and it needs to not be plural, it needs to be singular, is obviously the bit of grammar, and then you're cycling around and recycling, revisiting vocabulary. So it's that kind of, that's what segmentation is essentially, and you can kind of see. Let's hear this one.
Bonjour Abdel. Tu passes tes...
Okay, so you have to choose which of these two words is correct here. And obviously, again, it's attending you to the sort of plurality of the te versus ton. And you could do that as a pure reading, of course, but it is nice to have the audio. So students work out which noun comes next. That's based on gender and number. Then you click to reveal the correct option. You continue the audio all the way through. And once all of the nouns are revealed, then obviously you've still got quite a lot of parts of the text that haven't been processed yet. They haven't thought about what the whole thing means. So then they do a quick summary in English of the text after that. I'm moving on because I think I've got I think I've probably been going quite a long time. Okay, so in terms of this one, again, similar, just in German. I guess we all like to see examples in our own language, just to get a sense of, if I say this is year 8 fairly recently, and we're just at the end of producing the end of term 2 resources now for year 8. So this is towards Easter of year 8, given that on the understanding that they've had 2 hours a week starting in year 7. Again, I'm trying not to see any typos that there are in it, but playing up to the gaps need some thinking as well, because you can have useful gaps where it's you can get a whole structure to follow out of it. So here I've put a gap after hat Lust, and because our whole focus has been something zu plus infinitive, then students need to produce a whole other thing here. It could be that they just say mit Heidi ins Restaurant zu gehen, if that's the only thing they know how to vary, but it might be that they can be a little bit more adventurous. So there's sort of you're drawing out answers from students that can push themselves just a little bit further at this point, but there is a way of accessing the task for other students too. I think segmentation and dictogloss tasks are really rich for the reasons that I've explained. After this break, I'm taking a break now, and I'm going to very swiftly pass on to David. I wanted to say just very, very quickly though, the reason that I have connected with David over Connect is because do you like what I did there? Because I'm very passionate about, as most of you know, because a lot of you were here last week, very, very passionate about this group of people in Peru that I perceive need my help, but not just the financial help of keeping a roof over and making sure they're clothed and that, which is very, very important as well. But as soon as we've satisfied, those essential needs, and there are, lots of people working, well, lots of people, there's a small team of 2 working over there to see that bit happens. What I really wanted to do was to be able to offer them some education during this time, because schools are closed. And so I have very tentatively, but I'm getting more confident every single day with using this fantastic tool called Connect to build up our communication, and for me to leave exercises for them to do whilst I'm asleep and they're not, because they're on the other side of the world. So I'm going to pass on to David, who's going to actually show you how it works this time.
Thank you, Rachel.
Shall I stop sharing my screen now?
Can I share mine?
You can. I'm going to stop sharing mine.
Hello, everybody. I'm David from Sanaco. I trust everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Wonderful. Sanaco as a company has been supporting Rachel with Arequipa in Peru. I think it's a very worthy cause, and I trust everybody will be donating. There's a little plug for you. I've been around a long time. My official title is David. I'm Director of UK Operations for Sanaco. Most people know me as David from the North, which is fine by me. And this is the product which Rachel is actually using to share exercises, get feedback, all kinds of things. I did this last week, and I got some feedback from various people who attended. I believe the phrase was "could try harder" or "could do better." So a little bit harder this time round. So what is it all about? The first thing I would say is we're not trying to compete with Teams or Zoom or Google. They're fine. They have their own place. Sanaco Connect is a product that's designed specifically for language teachers. It has a lot of things that Teams and Google and Zoom don't have, but then again, it has things that you could need, but it's an evolving product. So basically, we have many, there's about 1,500 of these installations around the UK at the moment. Globally, that goes to about 60,000 with 7 million people using them every day, somewhere in the world. It's a big operation. These are all great. These are fantastic within school, but quite often people want to go outside school. So these would be networked around your school. They're called the study range, very popular. But the question was, well, how can we start to share exercises and work with students outside of the classroom? This was obviously highlighted with COVID, as you can see. We have various products. We have the pronunciation testing system, but we have Sanaco Connect, and this is the one I'd like to focus on because it's the one that Rachel's using. So there's various activities these things could do. Everything from role play activities, your students can be sat anywhere. We have a group discussion activity, the automatic voice insert. There are so many things the systems can do. Perhaps we fail because we don't publicize this enough, but because we have so many people using them, sometimes we feel we don't have to, which is extremely arrogant. I accept that. It works in two ways. The asynchronous mode. So obviously we have teacher sat in the UK. Rachel's taken to cross-dressing and is now wearing a shirt and tie, as you can see. And of course, she's dealing with her students in Peru. In between there is the cloud. Everybody knows the cloud. Lots of advantages and disadvantages. But the way the system works, Rachel quickly creates an exercise, uploads it to the students, who then, of course, do the work and send it back. Very, very simple. And it's all based on question, answer, gap filling, all kinds of activities. However, we can take things a stage further. Exactly the same for asynchronous mode, but we can also have live teacher support. So if a teacher is perhaps remotely listening in, we all know Rachel's up at 2 o'clock in the morning listening to students working in South America. So she can just click on a student and listen to what's being said. And we have the same activities, but this time with a live teacher support. So whilst the UK, Sanaco is a Finnish company. Finland has well, like most of Scandinavia, Finland has a fantastic educational system. And they're a little bit surprised that the UK isn't really doing speaking exams this year. But often, as I have been told, it's where students perform best. It can support, as Rachel's touched on, speaking the language. It can develop proficiency in writing. And one thing is for certain, the speaking exams will return. So perhaps we should just keep on practicing it so we don't miss out a year. With Connect, this system, we call it Connect. It's an unfortunate name, I suppose, but it's because it collects communities around the world. We can do live role play activities. It's not unusual, certainly in mainland Europe, where schools will work with partner schools and just set up live role play activities with students sat in different countries. It's very easy to do. Yes, we can embed YouTube videos and group discussions, all kinds of things. Thing to remember about embedding YouTube videos, of course, is we mustn't break any copyright rules, but it does work. We have textual gap filling and audio gap filling. What I would like to do is have a go. We're going to make some mistakes. That's not an issue. Everybody makes mistakes. It's the way of the world. I'm going to invite you to a lesson. We're actually going to try something. I'm expecting you to be well-behaved students. I don't want any bad language or any witty remarks that I don't understand. And we're going to do a very, very quick image description exercise. So we have the teacher, we have our students, and I'm going to select some of you delegates or people who would like to volunteer. And we're going to do something very quick, simple. I'm just going to put forward an image for students to work on. There's all kinds of things we can do, literally all kinds. When I ask you to speak, you click start when you've shared the exercise. And then down here, you click on the record button. Please remember not to press stop. Just speak and then stop when you've finished. So we're going to have a go. So the first thing I will want to do, this is my Connect screen. You can see the people please don't look at the Ministry of Defence. Close your eyes to that. But the Ministry of Defence use this product. They have a very large, I'm hoping there's nobody here from the Ministry of Defence. They have a very large language teaching operation. I won't say where, but it's in sort of just southwest of Birmingham-ish. That's vague enough. And it's called the Defence School of Languages because in the military now, once you reach the rank of sergeant, you have to have a second language. That's it. There's no discussion. That's just the way it is. So these would be my lessons. These would be like French, Spanish, German, Italian. And here's today's, you see, totally prepared. So this is the lesson. I can see I've got 3 colleagues sat overseas. They could well be drunk because they're 2 hours ahead of us. Who knows? I've segregated them into Group A so they don't have to listen to me. And I want to invite some people to join this lesson now. So I'm going to put in the chat, bear with me, where's chat? A link. And that link is just the one I've copied from here. So could I ask, I only have a 10 position license, so anybody more than 10 will struggle to get in. Could I just ask a few people just to click on that link, if you would, and you will start to appear in my screen. I'm waiting. Hey, people are starting to log in, good. It would be good if you could put your name in there when prompted. And the reason for that is very, very simple, that when we collect back all the student works, if you have John Smith as a name, then it will come back as johnsmith.mp3, so we can identify. That's plenty, thank you. Even though everybody's just signing themselves in as user, everybody likes to be anonymous. Great. So what I'm going to do now is go to the exercises position, and here's some I've created. We have translation work, random pairing. This was a surprise to me after last week's session that some schools find it difficult to practice their oral assessments online, whereas in Scandinavia, it's a standard feature. It's something they do all the time. So it's here, but to keep it simple, I'm just going to share a few exercises with you. If you would click on the exercise you'd like to do, follow the instructions, i.e. click start, then click speak, describe what you're seeing, and submit. So I'm just going to start sharing exercises. So this is all I do, share exercise, and you'll probably get something coming up saying you've had an exercise shared with you. You can just pick the one you want to work on. Absolutely fine, no problem at all. And I will be able to see here. Yeah, you may need to allow access to your microphone. So could you just have a go at clicking record? I can see Pivy is open, for example. Pivy's opened the exercise here. Just say a few things, if you would, that'd be great. That's great. I can see when people are in record and what exercise they're working on. So could I just ask you to click stop and submit? That would be fantastic. So if I go back now to my screen across the top, I've got some submissions. I can see somebody has submitted some Spanish work. We have some French, some English. Karen, thank you. You've submitted some Spanish. So I have basically your work here. It's all there. I can download the audio if required.
Je peux voir la tour Eiffel.
I don't know why people are always very nervous at speaking for the first time. And then, of course, we've got Pivy, but we won't listen to her. Okay, so you can basically see what's happened. We have taken a very simple image, we've added a recorder, and we can download the work, either everybody simultaneously or individual students. We can sort by name or by answer. So it will give me the student's name and their work, and to however many we have. Excuse me. I'm hoping everybody's still there.
Is Pivy a colleague that we're not allowed to listen to because you think she might have said something rude to you?
I know Pivy extremely well. She said something very, very rude.
We were feeling so sorry for her.
Yeah.
I think because
when I go to Finland, Pivy is my drinking partner, but simply because I cannot afford to buy the beer over there. It's very expensive. So yeah, she will have taken the mickey out. Mind you, she may have done it in Finnish, so never mind. Of course, you're going to have students who forget to click submit. It always happens. So as a teacher, we can click on collect, which will collect back all their work. That was a very, very simple example. And as I said, we can do more advanced things. For example, this is a voice insert facility using a video, it's translation. This is courtesy of University of Leeds, by the way. I would like to say thank you to them. This is Portuguese. But that's what Connect is. It basically allows the teacher to share work, support them in a live mode if they wish. They can...
I have a question for you, David, actually, that's come up in the chat. Someone says, we have some students in China. Can they access this there? Currently, we have to use Microsoft Teams instead of Google. Yes,
the answer is yes. The thing about China, as we found, for example, the University of Sunderland is one of our big customers. They teach students who are sat in China using this. Things to remember, and it's more of a political problem than a technical problem, is that in some regions, well, most regions of China, the Chinese authorities block Google Chrome. However, Firefox is well used and it works with Firefox and Edge. Pretty much any browser except Google Chrome for some reason. We don't know why. So yes, it works in China. For example, the University of Birmingham, they do things the other way around. They have Chinese teachers sat in China teaching students Chinese in England, in Birmingham. So there are many, many things to do. I can't run through everything now, but you can create every single exercise from the simple image description I've just spoken about to voice insert activities, which is like a question and answer. You would record your name, a few questions. What is your name? Where do you live? How old are you? And the system will automatically allow the student to insert their answers into the questions. The days of leaving gaps to answer, whilst you can still do it, long since gone. You can do question and answer, vocab testing, written exercises, so many, many things. But just because it can do something, it doesn't mean to say you have to do something. Most schools are using them differently. The universities have gone wild for this in the UK. What we did when COVID arrived in March this year, we made this product freely available to all our customers throughout the UK, and there was a very big take-up. And we've been surprised how many people have kept it going. A, because we still have COVID, maybe nobody thought it would still be around this long, but B, because it's proving very, very popular, far more popular than we ever expected. Many schools use it. There was one in London, St. Benedict's in London. They used to use our traditional languages systems, which were networked around the school. As soon as COVID came along, they just switched to this and lessons pretty much carried on as they were. Okay, I've talked for a long time and I don't like to hear the sound of my own voice. Yes, just one thing, Helen. Absolutely, it is GDPR compliant. The Scandinavians are very, very keen on this kind of thing. There are some platforms out there which are not very GDPR compliant, but we have to be. As far as we're concerned, the only person we will know as a company is the administrator. That would be the person who's actually bought the system. We set them up with an email address. The students are completely anonymous to us. We don't know who they are, where they are. The only person who would know that would be the teachers using the system. We don't know. Okay, I'm just keeping an eye on the questions as we do this. I'm not very good at this kind of thing. But if anybody does have any particular questions or just wants to trial it, we're happy to let people have trials of this system. Interestingly enough, the Orkney Islands, Stromness Academy, they're using it. I was so impressed because their students, it happens to them every year. We worry about COVID, but they have inclement weather every year. And sometimes students just can't get into class. So this is the way forward. It's designed to be a blended learning system. What I would say is it's never going to replace our traditional systems in the classroom, but it's there as an option, an optional extra for people who may want to use it. Okay. Rachel, are you back on now, or do you want me to keep talking and making things? I can sing a song, tell a joke.
No, it's fine. I shall quickly share my screen and and go. Thank you. And yeah, and obviously if you are working at a distance, then that is your classroom, isn't it? You know, and lots of us have found in ways that we never ever thought possible that remote working you know, has to be embraced and has to be something that we get really comfortable with. So you know, whether it's students in Peru or whether it's just students down the road in the school that aren't in the school, it's it's definitely worth trying out, I would say. Okay, so this I'm aware of time, so I know some people will just need to go, but obviously the session's being recorded, so some people will potentially be able to come back and access this bit later. I am going to talk about the second part now. So before David, the pre-David was meaningful practice focused on language and getting into the nitty-gritty with grammar structures in particular. This is about working with authentic texts and how rich text resources can provide opportunities for meaningful practice. And you know, I'm talking to what is it when you don't have to do any convincing at all? Anyway, I know that the message about
converted. That's
right. There you go. Preaching to the converted. Thank you, Helen. When I say that, you know, authentic texts are an additional source of intrinsic interest, and that can be whether the text is factual or fictional. Just the enjoyment of hearing different rhythms, different sounds, rhyme that you might get from a poem or from a song, different ways words are put together. We like that. We're hardwired to enjoy experiencing language in a variety of different ways. So that's one source of interest. Why we might additionally want to use them and sort of exploit them in depth is that they're a different way, a different opportunity to revisit some of those essential knowledge strands, but in a different context. One of the things about learning vocabulary and grammar, or essentially all of the language strands, is that you need to encounter them not only in a spaced way, not only repeated often, but also with different vocabulary. So words need to come up in different contexts with different features. Grammar needs to come up with different words attached to it, so that the whole thing doesn't there's a mixing and matching in the knowledge base, rather than certain words and patterns getting stuck with each other and only there and sort of fossilizing. There's the chance to learn additional vocabulary incidentally. You know, a lot of the research on vocabulary produces really varied answers because we're all very individual people. And if you do a quick experiment in your class at the end of a lesson and say, well, what's your favorite word from the last 2 lessons we've had, there'll be a variety of responses to that. It won't just be that all of them say the same word, and that's because they've latched on to something in that word that's reminded them or made a connection with something else that's made it more memorable, funny, or a connection with something emotive. So we're all very different, and we all do learn some additional vocabulary incidentally. We have that capacity. We just can't rely on that the whole time. So we can't just work with authentic texts 24/7 in all of the lessons we do, because we would be leaving a little bit too much up to chance. We can't then predict which language pupils will know, and that will become problematic for us. Obviously, we work in a school system where at the end there will be an exam. We can't just say, oh, well, they know the language they know because these are the texts that I felt like teaching them. But there is a lot to be gained from using authentic text. The requirement to work with some unfamiliar language, and again, we need to sort of have a sense of how much will that be, how much unfamiliar language will we be putting into this text, or will we be allowing or expecting learners to understand in this text. You know, around about 10% unfamiliar, we might want to gloss it. We might want to use it specifically to draw out the meaning from, so make that the focus of working out what that unfamiliar language might mean because of all the words around it that you know, but it needs thinking through rather than leaving to chance. And there's the opportunity, of course, to use at the end of exploring a really rich text to have an outcome from it that's a different type of production than the normal sort of production that we might tend to have in other lessons. So I did say I would show some full lesson sequences, and when I started practicing this session, putting it together, well, when I said practicing, there was not really a lot of time for practice, but started sort of guesstimating how much I had time for, I realized that there wasn't time for absolutely every single part of the lesson. So I have had to draw things out. Full lessons are available, and typically we've attempted to make 2 full lessons out of 1 text. And it might not be that the text plays a primary role in both of those lessons, but in some cases it does, and it's right the way through, and then there's an extended opportunity for production at the end. So going to have a quick look at a couple of literary texts, and then a little look at non-fiction, just for the variety. But again, what I said last week about profiling the text and knowing its readability before you start, you know, that is a crucial sort of step 1, really. You know, what language do learners bring to the table, and what language am I then presenting them with, and is it the right level of challenge? Do they know 90% of these words or not? How many do they not know? What am I glossing, etc. And obviously I talked about the profiler last week, so I'm not going to mention that again. One of the things that was really nice about thinking about this aspect of meaningful practice was some involvement and input from a teacher trainer researcher at the University of Reading, Professor Suzanne Graham, whose work is on the NCELP website. She did some training for our teachers initially on why use authentic texts and how to use them. So there are some really good documents. If you look at if you put meaningful practice into the resource portal, it will pull up her original session. And one of the things that she said was the sort of the way in at the beginning, just exposing learners to perhaps a little bit of the text, and then asking them to think about what type of text this is going to be, to do some sort of anticipation, some thinking around. So this is from year 7. This is a year 7 French lesson. Some of you will know this Machado poem. But here we've got, oh, I wonder if I've taken my, oh no, I am still sharing computer sound. Okay, so lee el texto, ¿qué tipo de texto es? So we're just having a look initially at these 4 lines from the poem. Is it un artículo? Is it una novela? Is it un poema? What do you think? Why do you think so? Frases cortas, repetición.
La plaza tiene una torre.
And then it goes straight in with several lines of the poem, which are going to be read aloud. So again, this sort of dual coding of reading and listening at the same time.
La plaza tiene una torre. La torre tiene un balcón. El balcón tiene una dama. La dama, una blanca flor.
Okay, so the pictures are obviously there to support the meaning. Pupils have pre-learnt some words, but again, this is now, they haven't practiced those words at the beginning of the lesson because this is a slightly different lesson. So if they haven't done their homework, they'll be working here with pictures and listening along and thinking. They do know tiene, because that was one of the purposes of choosing this poem now. Okay, so before we go further with the poem, just thinking about the author, providing a little bit of background information, helping students sort of put him into a century, or just kind of, you know, is this someone still alive? Is this, you know, what, when were they writing? Where do they come from? So here, obviously, a map situating them geographically, and a few details that again are in the target language, using some verbs that in this context we think students will be able to process. Estudia has already been learnt. Viaja is one of the unknown words, but that is glossed here. And habla francés. So trying to, it's very simple. You can see that it's not in the past tense. We're making liberal use of the present historic, because that is language that students can then process, and then we'll have the meaning. Obviously, we know that this author is dead, so he's not doing any of these things now. But okay, so his intereses, what motivated his work, la memoria. Of course, we're not going in depth, but we're giving details of his life, la reflexión, and el romance. And el romance might need some unpacking, because in a poetic sense, we're not just talking about kind of romance. We're meaning romance in the sense of a poem, a sort of a poetic creation, like a ballad, a narrative poem. And that is not something that we're going to expect Year 7 students to know. So again, important to bring those things out. Let's have a little bit of a look at if we can identify who he might be. Again, the purpose about this is to get interest, you know, to garner interest in this person and make them feel real. But also underneath it, and why the language has been very carefully chosen and paced, is that, you know, here we've got ¿Quién es?, a question that they've already met before. Es, you know, who is this Antonio Machado? Which is he of these photos? And then, obviously, once we've worked out that it's this guy, ¿Cómo está en la foto? Again, playing on the difference, juxtaposing es and está on consecutive slides to keep all the time this focus on meaning and form, knowing that they've spent several weeks on that verb, so beginning to be able to use it in a different context. Here talking about this poet. Está serio, está alegre, está raro. For some bizarre reason, students really love using the word raro. Or is it just in my classes? I had one student who got a tremendous amount of pleasure of describing me as rara the whole time. But at least he agreed his adjective, so I let him get away with it. Okay, we're going to listen to the poem and put it in order now. So this is the whole of it. This is now, it's a small text. I've cut out a slide. We've heard the poem in full on the previous slide, and this time we're reading out 5 parts of it again, but in a jumbled order, and students have to decide which section goes with which part. So again, we are familiarizing and reading aloud. We haven't got to the understanding part yet, apart from those first 4 lines where we've seen pictures. So there's a bit more to come in terms of working out what the whole thing is about. So we're going to come to that now. I skipped over the audio, I'm afraid. So here we've got reading the poem and saying what each pair of lines actually is telling us. So which one tells us that a man has gone past, which one tells us who's on the balcony. So again, standard comprehension questions, but just getting at the meaning of the different parts of the text. Again, I think there was some other parts in lesson 1. This is now the start of lesson 2 in the same week. So we start with a couple of lines of the poem and the instruction to complete the phrase with la or una. And here we see quite an important pattern in language where you very often have this indefinite article, and then more detail given in that, you know, this is about textual cohesion, isn't it? what did we call that last week in the competence model, sort of discourse competence, sort of understanding that, you know, what is likely after you've had la plaza tiene una torre, you've said that this thing exists, so there is one, and now you're going to describe it a bit more, so following on by saying the. So this whole connection seems really simple, that we're still coming back time and time again to drawing out meaning of the small words that often get overlooked. So, okay, we've got another ideal couplet from the poem. La torre tiene un balcón, el balcón tiene una dama. So often we have exercises that work on one or the other, but it's bringing the two together that I think is helpful for meaning here. Okay, and then this being a normal lesson where vocabulary has to keep being recycled, and it might be vocabulary that isn't actually in the poem, but because of this spacing that we talked about being really important for students' retention, it just so happens that we need to revise some things that are in the town, some vocabulary that's in the town in this particular lesson. But I really like the way Nick did this. And Nick was the person that put this lesson together. So we've still got the kind of context. La dama from the poem is describing a town. What is there? So hay una plaza, taking the words una torre, y, and then obviously we're cueing pupils to say what else she's going to say about what there is in this town. Again, I think it, as well as obviously linguistically revising the words that we need to revise in this particular week, it also makes a connection between the context of the poem, which is literally saying in the town is this, in the square is this, in the square there's a tower, in the tower there's a balcony, in the balcony there's a woman. So again, it's showing the sort of relationship in structure between the language they've learnt and the language that's in this poem, used by this very famous poet. So again, those things are drawn out, and a little bit more vocabulary revision, because these words are going to be used again in the speaking, and the speaking activity that follows. Again, when you think about that poem, only had 10 very short lines in it. So when you think about a whole lessons activity on it over two lessons, so a week's activity on it, you know, it might feel a little bit limited, but I really like this. So el caballero y su caballo, person A, you are the caballero, and you have to say what you want and what your horse wants. Again, you can see here that there's this contrast between quiero, quiere, and the person listening has to understand who wants what. Who is it that wants these things? Is it the caballero or the caballo? Again, obviously we're bringing out that these are characters from the poem, but what they want is obviously slightly incongruous with the poem itself, but nevertheless I think this works. So yeah, you can imagine the caballo wanting a glass of water. Again, I had lots of fun with that. So there was a productive task at the end, but I needed to cut and move on. But that lesson's on the portal, so it's worth doing, and it's really fun. The poem is really fun to use. This lesson I have Eva Lam to thank for. It was on the ALL literature wiki, which I really recommend that if you don't know about it, you find out about it and go and look. It's a lovely repository of some really nice suggestions from lots and lots of teachers about different texts that they've used, and I found this on there and made a lesson from it. And so this is a Bertolt Brecht poem, Vergnügungen, which had to obviously gloss. I can hardly even say it. It's not a really easy word to pronounce, but meaning pleasures. But actually the words in the poem are really rather accessible. And believe it or not, we used it as a way to access for the first time adjective endings in German. So we're listening to the poem. First of all, students had to write down anything that they understand. So any words that they understand. And obviously having put it all through the profiler first, you know, we know which words they've actually met. That doesn't mean they're going to recognize them all in the context, but as a whole class, we know the ones that we can kind of expect that they will get. I'll give you a little bit of a flavor of this.
Der erste Blick aus dem Fenster am Morgen. Das wiedergefundene alte Buch. Begeisterte Gesichter. Schnee, der Wechsel der Jahreszeiten. Die Zeitung. Der Hund. Die Dialektik. Duschen, schwimmen. Alte Musik. Bequeme Schuhe. Begreifen. Neue Musik. Schreiben. Pflanzen. Reisen. Singen. Freundlich sein.
Oh, it's lovely, isn't it? When you have to hear poetry read aloud, don't you? So which words did they understand? They wrote down some words. We then sort of want to reactivate the known vocabulary that they've now encountered in this new sort of strange context where words are not quite in sentences and they've been put together strangely. So do they recognize them? Again, a really, really important element of word knowledge that they encounter these words in different contexts. So erste was a word they'd been taught before, so was Blick, so was Fenster, so was Morgen, Buch, Wechsel, Jahreszeit, Zeitung, Hund, Duschen, Schwimmen, Musik, bequem, Schuhe. I didn't put the bequeme Schuhe because we haven't seen that bit yet. Begreifen, schreiben, pflanzen, reisen, singen, freundlich sein. Now, when you look at that, actually, that's not the whole poem, but it's pretty near. And at the stage in year 8, it was first term year 8, week 5. They had met all of those words, obviously a lot of them previously in year 7, which is then a kind of amazing thing when you think, well, I wasn't planning to do this poem, but actually look at how many words they happen to know. Why do they happen to know all of those words? Well, because the most frequent words are the most frequent words. So they're also the words that you know, authors, journalists, songwriters keep using. It's not to say that everything out there on the web will all be this accessible, but you know, a number of things are. All of the words not in bold are the things that they didn't know. So at this stage they hadn't yet met alt, for example, or Schnee or neu. They have met those words now, but they hadn't met them then. You know, unlikely that I'm ever going to teach them the word dialectic, to be honest, in a German lesson. But you know, I've in order to explain exactly what it was, I had to look up a definition, and I've put that underneath the slide so that no one else finds themselves in a lesson thinking, now how do I explain dialectic exactly? These are the words that we then wanted to gloss.
Vergnügungen.
Ooh, and then it goes, there's another reading. I wanted to have 2 different voices reading it. At the end of that lesson, pair of lessons, we've done some work with adjective endings by the end of it, actually taking the poem apart and looking at those endings. So adjective endings in the nominative case, which, you know, any teachers of German, we often struggle to think, well, how to teach those meaningfully, because far more often it's, you know, ich habe einen guten Film gesehen, and you want them in the accusative straight away. But actually having a really, really, really good authentic context in order to encounter and explore nominative endings, adjective endings is absolutely brilliant. At the end, they then wrote their poem about essentially what makes them happy. The whole series of 2 lessons was what makes you happy, and a really, really nice example. And thank you to Ava for excellent find and her ideas on it, which I integrated into it. So having a quick look at a couple of non-fiction texts, and I will move a little bit faster, but again, principle's the same with a non-fiction text. So you're trying to anticipate the key ideas of the text. You're trying to you're trying to sort of get a flavor for a sense for the things that they can spot. So looking at a photo first can be a really nice way of doing it. Obviously, these questions deliberately chosen because they can be accessed by pupils in the target language. C'est quel mois? Which month is it? What are they doing? Who are they? Where are they? What are they like? And not going in depth at this stage. Just literally collecting a few ideas. And I don't think particularly correcting language at this stage. It's just getting their anticipation, getting their enthusiasm and ideas, and just building a little bit of interest. So this guy, who I'd never heard of, is a French astronaut. He comes from Normandy. And what is he like? We're going to have a little bit of a look at some important moments in his life so far, and practice some dates at the same time. So when does he do some of these things in his biography? So obviously this is built around the text. This is not the text itself. This is sort of leading up and giving some background, again for interest, but also of course to exploit the language and provide another context to practice key language that they've met before. So here,
le 17 novembre.
So just writing the dates when he did all of these things, obviously working with students to understand what they refer to, these dates. So eliciting that orally.
Le 13 janvier.
Okay, etc., etc. And then again, this is phonics practice, coming from the text, coming from the first 3 phrases. How many R's can be heard? Again, it's just focusing on the same language but for different reasons, drawing out different knowledge from it. We're listening to the tally first.
Au réveillon de Noël sur l'ISS, la gastronomie française au menu.
Right, so I've realized that I've cut a slide there. So any of you thinking, well, that was a massive jump from what you just did there. We are when we're listening to the 3 phrases, they have been listened to before. Sorry, I knew there would be some issues with me having to cut and paste. But listening again to the phrases after we've listened out for how many R's we can find in them, listening to them again and saying, what is the subject? Is it la cuisine, les fêtes, les emplois, les astronautes? And having a quick opportunity to discuss with a partner, because that always makes people feel more bold when they're in areas where we've got some unknown language going on. Always good to have pair discussion to before they have to put their hands up and tell you. Oh, those were the transcribed versions of those. Okay. Identifying the type of text next, and I think again this comes down to that sort of, we're accessing bit by bit this discourse competence. What type of text is this? How do we know? Article, histoire, poème, and why? Hoping obviously that students recognize it as an article, but why is it an article? Do we, is that immediately obvious to all students and explicit that one of the reasons we know why is because we've got a date, we've got a sort of big bold title, but we haven't got any rhymes in it. So again, just drawing to the surface, making explicit some of those underlying bits of knowledge that pupils have. Okay, and then next, okay, you can see that we are working with revisiting or reviving our modal verb knowledge in order to complete sentences from the text, and it says that they can use these more than once or not at all. So really sort of challenging them in this new context to get the meaning of the whole phrase, and therefore which modal verb will fit in there. These are quotes from the article itself. I know you haven't read the article itself yet. We're coming on to that now. But I think the general principle that I'm wanting to show is you've got the sort of raise interest and get them thinking about what type of task it is, getting them interested in the people that are involved, maybe using a picture, and then sort of beginning to pull out bits of the language so that it's a gradual reveal rather than here's the whole text immediately, so that by the time they actually get to see the whole text, they've seen half of it already, but spread out over a number of different activities, and they've done some processing for meaning already, so that it's not then so overwhelming when they get the whole thing. So now they read the whole article, having it as a Word document to read themselves, and then divide these activities. So this is the first comprehension activity, to decide when these things are done, whether they're done in the past, the present, and the future, or the future, and you know, recognizing that this is actually a very GCSE way of extracting knowledge from pupils as well. So this is early on in year 8 when pupils are reading this. Here's the full text. If you want to see it, there's quite a lot of detail underneath the slides about where the article came from, how it was adapted, which unknown words there are in it, which are cognates, and frequency of all of those, etc. And obviously, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So I've never taught this lesson, but I encourage you to consider using it and then feedback. One more, I think, and this is just for we haven't had any Spanish for a while. This is a factual text about South America. Vamos a leer un texto. ¿Qué país es? So having a look at the overall picture as well, the overall continent, all of the countries in it, and then trying to narrow down. So can we narrow down qué país es from this clue here? El español es un idioma oficial. So using the opportunity to rework language that they have previously studied. So all these words are known to them, or at least have been previously taught and learned. So they might not be fresh, but we're bringing them back. Es un país en el centro. No tiene costa. Okay, so now we begin to narrow down the options. Tiene una frontera con Perú, Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil. Put in the chat which country this is. And if we still hadn't got there, we've now got the first letter, and then we've got Bolivia. Okay, so again, a little bit of anticipation building up to what is this text going to be about. And now we're going to do a bit more prediction and make some predictions about what Bolivia is like. We don't know anything about it yet, but some people might not. No expectations that anyone will know anything about Bolivia. So students speaking using hay, no hay, tiene, es, no tiene, es. So those 3 of those really crucial verbs that they would learn in their first year to manipulate. And here they're saying what there is, what there isn't, in their opinion. No right and wrong answers at the moment. Obviously, they're going to read and find some things out in a moment. But it's just really about getting the anticipation going. I really like this text because it's been divided into sections and different things are done with each section. So I think it's quite a strong model. Here we've got Geografía, which can be read just in and of itself and worked on in and of itself, and then the rest of the text could be put aside to a different lesson. So it's quite flexible. But here we're going to check whether our predictions about Bolivia are true or false. And ask questions. ¿Cómo es la región alta? ¿Hay glaciares? ¿Tiene paisajes diferentes? Trying to draw out that they have the Amazonian region and the Andes, the montañas, sierra. Asking students what else they can say about the geography of Bolivia from reading the text. So a little bit of oral exploitation first of all, and then with this one, which is about idiomas y educación. Again, I really like this. I think, you know, recognizing that in most parts of Latin America, it's not just Spanish that's spoken. There are many flourishing, important other languages that have a role to play in people's lives. So reading and understanding that, finding out the names of those, is just interesting information. The only word that needed glossing was indigenous, which is probably a concept that needs explaining anyway. You know, not just the meaning, which is a clear cognate, but actually needs checking and thinking and giving a definition. So again, we see that it's that cultural capital side of things that we're also adding to general word knowledge, as well as general world knowledge. Here we've got a little bit of focus on the grammar and use of verbs. Drawing out from them that an N on the end means we're talking about a plural subject, and E on the end means we're talking about singular. So previous grammar that they've done, but just being re-exploited here. We're going to listen to this part.
La ciudad y el campo. Ahora la población de las ciudades crece mucho. Un factor es que mucha gente del campo busca una vida mejor allí. Hay más oportunidades de trabajo y servicios públicos. Sin embargo, no todas las ciudades son seguras y hay problemas de ruido y contaminación.
Okay, so the reason why we're writing those two missing phrases. So again, that's obviously a transcription with for phonics, but also those particular ones are where we begin to see a way of creating connections between nouns with the de in between, whereas in English we could say opportunities of work literally, but we would also be more likely to say work opportunities, job opportunities, noise problems, noise issues, and so there's then an activity to exploit that, but using the language and the thematic content from this Bolivia text. So here, Quechua teacher would be profesor de Quechua, sort of drawing out that pattern, that language pattern, drawing attention to it. This is the first time they've seen that explicitly, but using the text to bring out a very, very small but nevertheless important part of language knowledge that they're building. There's more, but then this cuts to the text that they're then set to write for homework. Write your own text about another country in South America. You can be inspired by the text in Bolivia. Answer these questions: ¿Cómo es la geografía? ¿Tiene fronteras con otros países? ¿Cuántos idiomas existen ahí? ¿Hay mucho turismo? ¿Por qué no? A really, really enjoyable task for students to do, but really doable because of the model of the text they've had, which included practically every word in those texts was already taught and learned and just being served up, if you like, in a different context, showing, I think, what mileage you get out of these high frequency words, because I found that text very interesting. I learned some new things that I didn't know, and I think I know a number of things about this the continent. So I think pupils would find it interesting as content, but also be very able to make meaning themselves when they come to do the task without having to Google Translate, etc., etc. Now I'm finished, and actually I did just have a quick look while David was talking. Obviously I was listening to everything he was saying, but I had a quick look and I have gone over just over 60, or I've gone to 60% now. So thank you very, very much for all your support with this project. I mean, it's been really, really enjoyable doing these sessions and engaging with everyone. But I did have this purpose also in the back of my mind. So thank you for your support with that. I hope there've been some interesting things in there. I'm sorry that we must have run over time, and I'm sure everyone's left and only Helen has stayed on to the bitter end. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And I shall stop sharing. Slides will be available on Monday, as Helen said earlier. Thanks very much. Oh. Helen, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
I am mute. Yes, that's right. So just really, I was saying, thank you ever so much. You can see all of these comments. People are still here, Rachel, but I'm sure that also they were equally, you can understand there were some people who did have to go because we
Absolutely.
are 35 minutes after. She says quietly, only 35 minutes. But the thing is, people know, the lovely thing about this is that people, you know, are engaged and they know that they can watch the rest of it later on, because we've said that right from the beginning. So, and we've really enjoyed it. We've been here having our little, you know, commenting on things, and you'll be able to see those comments as well, Rachel, to see how much we've really enjoyed it. So on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for what you've done. Thank you to David for your little bit as well. That was fun.
I need to say thank you as well, because I really felt so terrible after last week's session when I didn't thank Helen profusely for honestly, I had you know, I came to her with a mad idea and said, oh, can you help me with this? And just the complete response sorted me out. But not only did the setup of the session, she showed me how to do it. So I've actually got some knowledge out of this whole process. I've been taught how to use Eventbrite, which I didn't know. The patience of Helen, and just the way she gives so much to all of us, and so willingly, and without needing thanks, or without saying she needs thanks. That I forgot it last week, but I really want to thank you this week. So I owe you 1/2/many.
That's very kind. I think you've more than made up for anything. There was absolutely no problem and no need either. But it was really, really a pleasure to be associated with this. So thank you so much. I mean, if people would like to open up their webcams, it's nice to see people. We could take a little picture for Rachel for her album. And then, of course, we've got tonight as well, hoping that people, I'm now going to, I've got the quiz ready to put into a PowerPoint. So that's what I'm going to do now over the next 2 hours before we start. So look, and people are showing themselves.
Hey.
Lovely to see you. All lovely.
It is nice to see faces. It's quite weird talking to yourself.
Well, actually, Stephen, because we've decided, haven't we, sometimes when you do your talk, you quite like having a face there. Someone's there just smiling and nodding, and then you know that someone's there.
Yes.
So, right. So I'm about to, are you all sharing your screen? So here goes. 1, 2, 3. There we go. One. And then I'll do another one. Oh. The thing I don't always do is remember to save it afterwards before I, right, let's see if we got carried on that. Yes, we have. So here's another one. 1, 2, 3. And that's nice. Margaret smiling as well, not making a face about some comment about a biscuit like we had last time. Remember that.
Oh, look at Danielle, you've got a different background.
Oh, yes. Oh,
how lovely.
Well, it's always a where's Danny? You know, I've got to surprise my tutees every time they come to me. They're in a different place. And then we talk about Les Volcans and the rest of it.
Danielle, she is just Miss Culture, definitely. And we've got a really good, last week we were talking about what to do for the Christmas party.
Yeah.
Danielle has sent me a really good list of questions which are asked to be a British citizenship.
Ooh, let's see
Which
how
I
many
went
of us
through.
would fail.
Well, I went through with David, who reckoned that well, that's just a silly question. That's a silly one. And that was just what people say when they don't know the answers to things. But
yeah,
no, it's really, really good. So I've created a little, it's called Who Wants to Be a British Citizen show from Danielle. So we've got
brilliant.
that.
See you later.
Okay, then. Lovely
Yeah,
to
see you later on.
Bye.
I know, if everyone
Thank you.
come back, everyone.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's a roast meal about to happen. I've got a feeling.
Oh my goodness.
I've got.
This is what you did to us last time. You said
I
you
know.
were going off for dinner.
I think. And was it
Bye,
roast
everybody.
last time? Bye. Yes. Bye. That looks really good, David. The Connect, the speed at which it's all just there, and it all means that it's all labelled.
We've made it as simple as,
No.
this is no disrespect, we've made it as simple as possible to use, Helen.
Mm.
And I've just got my iPad open at the side, and I mentioned Pivy, who is sending me some very rude messages now. Bad language as to why I wouldn't allow her to speak. And yes, it's in Finnish, but I won't go.
We needed the background because it sounded so cruel when you just said, well, we won't listen to her.
As soon as I said that, my phone pinged. But yeah, it is a good product. We like it. It's the principle. The technology has evolved because I've been around such a long time. It used to be open reels, cassettes, then sound cards, then it's just evolution. And it's proving very, very popular because it's simple to use. And of course, as soon as COVID came along, it kind of pushed it to the forefront. It's been in the background for a number of years.
Yeah.
But lessons need to continue. And quite right, Helen, GDPR is a key thing, and I always forget about it because I just take it for granted that every provider's system will be GDPR compliant. And of course they're not. So yeah. Oh, sorry, that's a rude word she's sent. I do apologise for that.
Oh, and I should stop the recording now. So
that's a good idea. Yeah.
Probably a good time.
Yeah, I'm blocking up.
And I'll send you the link, Rachel, when it takes about an hour to process or something like that. So yes, so I do have to go now to eat something. I've just realised that when you with the camera this way, you can see right through to our kitchen.
Oh yes.
Do you know where the kitchen is, Helen?
I rarely go there. The staff deal with it. Actually, I do, because my responsibility is laundry, and that's just beyond the kitchen. So and I'm not really very good at that either. David has his phrase is what is it, something like, shall I give a hint? And that means you haven't done the washing. You can't say you haven't done the washing. Shall I give you a hint? So
because washing machines are far too complex for the mere male brain to manage. Why do you need different degrees of temperature?
Well, I don't understand. Really. I just put it on the same. I put it on the one that takes an hour, whatever it is.
That's all you need.
Don't conform to type. Come on.
I think you'll find I am very much in touch with my feminine side. I just don't understand washing machines.
Okay.
For something that should be start, stop, on, off. 2 buttons. That's all you need. 2.
Because David can hear me, I'm not going to tell you about him and washing machines and why I do it. But certainly for a man who's so intelligent, not realising that black socks don't go with white.
I'm okay with that bit.
Yes, don't say that louder, Helen, or you won't be eating for a week.
You might be eating black socks.
Right, I do need to go now to be able to get this little PowerPoint together. So, and
absolutely,
are we going to see you, David, later on? You'd be very welcome to come and join our little party.
Oh, it's for you linguists. It's not for people like me.
I know the questions aren't all about languages.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could open a beer.
What makes you think I didn't have one open already?
Well, I can't see it. If you've got one already, it's just out of shot.
Strategically placed.
Obviously.
The
There
beer
you go.
fridge. There's the beer
Well,
fridge.
it's in the fridge, though. That means you haven't started, which is very commendable. Well done.
Beer fridge.
All right.
Yes, a must for every office.
Yes, you'll find it is vital. It does help things move forward.
I'm sure.
Okay,
Bye, everyone.
I'm
See you
stopping my
later,
video.
maybe.
I won't close it till you've all gone, but I'm.
See you later.
See you
Bye.
later. Bye.
I feel the need to see everyone else off.
Yes. Well, you can stay there.
Oh, there's my cat. My cat's had enough. Wants to go.